Hi, I'm Ilya Moshedi, and in this video we're going to talk about one of the immigration streams of Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program. So let me give you a little bit of background about myself and who I am. I'm a licensed immigration consultant and a licensed paralegal here in Toronto, Ontario. I've taught immigration law at CDI College, and I'm currently the paralegal program coordinator at Toronto School of Management. My main focus is corporate immigration, LMIAs, intra-company transferees, startup visa program, and immigration and refugee tribunal work. I've helped many companies successfully with respect to LMIA and intra-company transferee applications. I've also helped many individuals immigrate to Canada through startup visa program, and as well represent clients at IRB, or Immigration Refugee Board. Although our fee structure may not be suitable for every individual out there, but I felt the need to discuss and explore some of the most popular immigration programs because the available information on Canada immigration provincial websites are not very user-friendly, and therefore I decided to create these video series in order to help you go through the information more comfortably. So let's get started. So let's look at the AINP. AINP has 5 different streams: Alberta Opportunity Streams, Alberta Express Entry Stream, International Graduate Entrepreneur Immigration Stream, Self-Employed Farmer Stream, and Foreign Graduate Startup Visa Stream. This video we're going to talk about the Alberta Opportunity Stream. We're going to look at different components and the eligibility criteria, make it simple and easy to follow. So here, we're going to look at some of the requirements. So let's look at the residency requirement. So you must have a valid temporary resident status in Canada. That means no implied status, automatic extension of status, or restoration of status. And what do they mean? Implied status: when your status is about to expire and you ask to extend it. Then until you hear back from the government, you're under implied status. So they don't accept that as a residency requirement. Automatic extension, again, automatically extending of a status is not accepted. And restoration of status. So let's say if your status was expired and now you're trying to restore it, and they don't accept that. So that's as far as the residency requirement. Let's look at work permit requirements. You must have a valid work permit. And then they further define that: a positive labor impact assessment, LMIA, LMIA exemption for worker based on one of the following exemptions as determined by Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada. So internal trade agreements, workers transferred within a company, international experience class, mobilité francophone, an open work permit issued by IRCC to vulnerable workers who have demonstrated they're experiencing abuse or at risk of abuse in context of their employment in Canada, including under the Vulnerable Worker Open Work Permit, or VWOWP exemption, or the family member of a vulnerable worker under VWOWP exemptions. So these exemptions are accepted under LMIA exemptions. So continuing on work permit requirements, a post-graduation work permit held by a graduate of an Alberta Advanced Education Public Policy funded post-secondary institution, and they further define PGWP, or postgraduate work permit holders, must also meet specific occupation, education, and work experience requirement as set out further below. We'll discover those in a few minutes. Also, an open work permit issued under IRCC's open work permit public policy for former or current postgraduate work permit holders held by a graduate of an Alberta Advanced Education Public Policy funded post-secondary institution. And they're saying that holders of this open work permit must also meet the same specific occupation, education, work experience requirement as a postgraduate work permit holder set out below, and they'll further define it. We'll go through them and talk about them in advance. Now, occupation requirement. You must currently be working at the time of submitting your application in an eligible occupation in NOC 0 A, B, C, D that matches your previous work experience. It's very important. So NOC 0 A, B, C, D that matches your previous work experience. And you must be currently working at the time you're submitting your application. So there's a lot of stipulation. Now, there are ineligible occupations, and they set them out based on NOC code. We're not going to go through each and every one of them, but we're going to go through some of them. So look at NOC 0011, legislatures. Let's look at NOC 4154 at the bottom of the page, professional occupations in religion. Let's look at COS 1227, which is skill level B, court officers and justices of peace. And continuing on, let's look at 4412 in the middle of the page, and NOC level C, home support worker, housekeeper, and a related occupation. And across the page, 8611, which is NOC level D, harvesting laborers. So these are ineligible occupations. If you're in one of these, you do not qualify for Alberta Opportunity Stream. So let me go back to the previous page so you can take a look at some of these things. They are available on the website, but if you would like them in the formats that we've put together, you can send us an email and we can discuss that. Moving forward, education requirements. So you must have a minimum of high school education equivalent to Alberta standards. And they further define that you must provide a copy of an educational credential assessment, ECA. And they're saying you don't need an ECA if you have a Canadian degree, diploma, or certificate from a recognized Canadian post-secondary technical college or secondary institution, or you have a valid Alberta qualification certificate or a trade certificate recognized by Alberta Apprenticeship and Industry Training, or AIT. So for those, you don't need an ECA. Otherwise, you need to show your ECA education credential assessment. Minimum of high school is required. For post-graduation work permit holders, there's a different stipulation. So let's read that. Credentials must be one of the following Alberta Advanced Education approved credentials, and they define them. So if it's a certificate, you must have started attending the Alberta Credential Program before April 1st, 2019. Otherwise, a post-diploma certificate or post-bachelorette certificate, minimum of 1 year in length, diploma program, minimum of 2 years in length, undergraduate bachelor degree, graduate level degree, graduate level certificate, and graduate level diploma. Now let's talk about language requirements. So for NOC 0A and B, you need an IELTS of 5 in each of each language skills. For NOC C and D, IELTS 4 in each for each English language skills. And for NOC 3413, nurse aides, orderlies, and patient service associate, you need IELTS of 6 in each of the English language skill tests. We didn't include the French language because most people who are watching this program understand English and most likely are the ones that have IELTS under their belts, but similar requirements for French. So French is accepted, and similar requirements are there for French. You can look at the requirements on Alberta's website. So now let's talk about work experience requirement at the time your application is submitted. Your current occupation is the occupation you are working in. your current occupation must also match your work experience. Eligible work experience. So now they're defining the eligible work experience. So a minimum of 12 months full-time work experience in your current occupation in Alberta within the last 18 months. Or, if you don't have that, a minimum of 24 months full-time work experience in your current occupation in Canada or abroad within the last 30 months or both. This work experience can be a combination of experience gained in Alberta, in Canada, outside Alberta, or abroad. So they're kind of flexible on the work experience. Continuing on, you must have been full-time for a minimum of 30 hours a week. Must be for the same occupation as your current occupation. So again, we're still in the experience and requirement for the experience. Must have been authorized by Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada and with valid temporary resident status if completed in Alberta or Canada. Cannot have been gained while studying in Canada and doing co-op work placement or internship as part of a study program unless you are a postgraduate work permit holder who completed during a paid work term as part of your work program study at an Alberta post-secondary institution. To qualify for work term must have been, and they're explaining, in order to qualify for this, paid and full-time, minimum 30 hours a week, for work experience directly related to your current occupation, and for work experience all gained in Alberta. So postgraduate work permit holders require a minimum of 6 months full-time work experience in your current occupation in Alberta within the last 18 months. So that's another stipulation for postgraduate work permit holders. Now moving on to the next slide, licensing, registration, and certificate requirements. So if you're holding a license or a certificate, what are the requirements? So you must have the required licensing, registration, or certification to work in your current occupation in Alberta. If you're working in a compulsory trade in Alberta, you must have a valid Alberta apprenticeship and industry trade, AIT, recognized trade certificate. If you're working as a child care worker, you must have valid certification at level 2 early childhood educator, formerly child development worker, or level 3 early childhood educator, formerly child development supervisor. So those are with respect to licensing and certifications. The next thing you need is a job offer. All applicants must have a bona fide full-time job offer or employment contract from an Alberta employer to work in your current occupation in Alberta. Job offer or employment contract must be signed by you and your Alberta employer and must offer, and they give you a list, it must be continuous paid work, full-time work defined as minimum 30 hours a week, employment for 12 months or more, work in your current occupation, wages and benefits that meet provincial minimum wage, and a couple of more stipulations, meet or exceed the requirements set out in your LMIA, or if you're LMIA exempt, meet or exceed lowest starting wage for your occupation across all industries in Alberta as set out in ALE's website. Work for an eligible AINP occupation for which you have a work permit that meets AINP work permit requirements, which we discussed a little bit earlier. Now, there are ineligible applicants based on job offers. So if you have these job offers, you are ineligible. You are not eligible. Part-time, casual, or seasonal employees, regardless of their working hours. Independent contractors, business owners, or temporary agency workers, including individuals listed as directors, shareholders, or agents of the Alberta employer or on corporate registry system. Again, continuing on, employees who work for in Alberta in a place of employment that is not zoned for commercial or industrial operations, such as home-based business. So if you're working from home, it's not. And employees who do not work on the premise in Alberta, such as those who work in a virtual location or serve the employer by telecommuting from a location outside of Alberta. So if you're doing virtual work in Alberta for an Alberta employer, that's fine. But if you're virtually working for an Alberta employer but you're outside of Alberta, it's not accepted. So these are some of the requirements for the opportunity stream. I hope that you find this helpful and informative. If you have any questions, please let us know. info@mooreimmigration.com. Thank you and God bless.